area. There we go. Now I'm recording. Her work involves contributing to individual projects by applying reproducible workflows and data visualization techniques to capture and communicate complex and data-intensive concepts to a very non-technical audience. So we're hoping to hear from her today. Maybe some of her field experiences, some of her background, like how she got to where she's at today. And then so maybe after about 15 or 20 minutes, then we'll open the floor to ask, answer any questions that you have. Also feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll be able to help monitor and ask them after Elmera is done. Sound good? Excellent. So let me put you up. And I think we're good to go.
Sweet. Thank you for that introduction, Robin. So yeah, as Robin mentioned, my name is Elmera Azadpour. I use she, her pronouns. I am a data viz specialist with the Viz Lab in the Water Mission Area for the United States Geological Survey, or USGS as we like to call it. I've been with the USGS now for about a year and like 7 months or so. And I can talk more about sort of like my journey into this position. But yeah, just to tell you like a little bit more about myself. I'm originally born and raised in Oklahoma City, and then did undergrad at the University of Utah in environmental biology. And it was like actually during this time where I got my first exposure to data science, as I was doing a sort of like an honors thesis project. And I remember I was going out to the field. We were doing sort of like a sampling of inorganic versus organic fertilizers on a plot of land on Upper Campus. And I would get the samples, I'd come back, I'd analyze them, put them on the mass spectrometer and an elemental analyzer to get some numbers back. And I remember coming back with the spreadsheets and telling my mentor at the time, like, okay, I have these spreadsheets, like, what do I do? Do I just make these graphs in Excel? And they were like, no, like you're going to download this coding language called R. And I was like, what are you saying? Like, OUR or like the letter R? Like what? So I was confused. And they're like, yeah, the letter R, it's a statistical language. We're going to learn it together. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So that was sort of my first exposure to like actually downloading R and getting familiar with the software and tidyverse and all the fun things that come with using a new language. And so that was like my first exposure. And then I went on to do 2 summer internships with it was 2 internships that were in coordination with the Department of Energy. They were known as the Science Undergraduate Laboratory Internships. I believe we call them SULI, SULI. And you got to be hosted at a national laboratory, and I was hosted at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory for 2 rounds with 2 different mentors. And it was also during those times where I was able to grow in my data science skills and just ask more questions, learn more about environmental modeling, forest modeling specifically. Just got to work on some really cool projects that were like very cross-disciplinary and multi-agency projects that were across different agencies and things, which was super cool just to be exposed to at such like a young age. And then it was during that time actually where I was speaking with my second mentor for my second leg of that internship. And I was, asking them questions about graduate school, and I was like, I think I'm interested in doing a graduate program, specifically a master's, because I couldn't commit to a PhD at that point. And I was just able to kind of like ask them a bunch of questions about the process and how to apply and, getting letters of rec and things like that are obviously very important. And ultimately ended up applying to UCSB, which is the University of California in Santa Barbara, and applied to the Bren program, which is specifically a master's, like a professional kind of program, where my master's was in environmental science and management. And it was also during that time where, again, I sort of got to be able to grow in my environmental data science skills. I was also a forest sustainability fellow during that time. I also did a graduate fellowship through sort of a conjunctive program called MLab at UCSB, and got to work on some pretty cool Google Earth Engine, Landsat kind of analyses and data looking at agricultural abandonment across like Kern County in California. So yeah, like over the course of undergrad, these internships, grad school, I've been able to work on multiple projects and sort of put these tools in my toolbox, for lack of a better term. And ultimately was closing out my time at the Bren School for my master's program. And I was thinking about, the career that I wanted to have post graduate school. And I was thinking, a lot of folks take like the environmental scientist route, folks take the environmental law route. There's all kinds of routes you can take with that degree. And I knew I wanted to do something more technical and more analytical, just given my background and the skills that I had acquired over the years, and stumbled across this position that I now have, I believe actually on Twitter. I think someone had shared it or reposted it. And I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. And it kind of is like this intersection of data science and hydrology and like environmental science and data viz. And it was all these things that I was really interested in. And so I was like, you know what, let me just apply and see what happens. And applied towards the end of my master's program. Didn't hear back for a while because that's how federal goes. It just takes a while to get hired. Um, and ultimately got the job offer by like August. And I started around then. So it was a long process. I'm happy to like answer any questions if folks have like specific questions about the federal hiring process. But a lot of questions that I've been asked since starting in this position is like, why USGS? There's so many other agencies. And like, why this specific one? And the short answer is I don't have an answer. I just kind of saw the posting and applied and kind of went out on a whim. But I will say like the agency is very technical by nature. It's unlike the others in the Department of Energy or Department of Interior. Fish and Wildlife is very conservation focused. National Park is obviously a similar vein. But they all do, aspects of data science, not to like discredit or, take away from that. But USGS is very technical in that we have this whole stream gauge network. We have Landsat that we're running. There's a huge technical side that comes with USGS. And so that was something that I was really interested in. I also just think my previous experience with the Department of Energy kind of propelled me into wanting to take on a federal position. I've often been asked like, why not go the private route, or why not go consulting or something? And I think my exposure doing those internships at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab were so great in the sense that like I got to see all these scientists come together across the world and work on really awesome projects. And my team spans across the United States, and we all come together and get to work on these really fun projects. And so that's something that I really appreciate about my job. Also, just the impactful nature of it. I love being able to put out products that are public facing and can inform the public on hydrologic related events, such as like drought or flooding, or whatever our data viz or maybe a site that we're building is showing. And so just the impactfulness and sort of the public facing nature of it is something that I was really drawn to. And then additionally, sort of being in the data viz side of things, we have a lot of freedom in terms of like the creativity and the innovation, and we get to have a lot of leeway with that, which I think is really nice. And something that not a lot of federal data viz teams get to have. And that was something that I had asked early in my internship or in my interview process of like, how much creativity and how much freedom and autonomy do I get to have? And then I think obviously another side of working federal is the benefits as well. You get, health insurance and all those other things that, and job security and things like that, that I think are important to note as well. I've often also been asked, what does my job actually entail? Like, what do you mean when you say you're a data scientist and data viz specialist? And, it varies obviously week to week or maybe quarter to quarter. But I will say, like, obviously a lot of my job is meetings. So some of these meetings are project focused, where we're kind of working together to synergize about different topics and different focus areas and things that we want to work on as a team. I have one-on-ones with my supervisor biweekly, just to like touch base, make sure that we're both on the same page. And I can bring up any sort of things that, maybe I might be feeling overwhelmed or something like that I can bring up with them. Specifically working with the Viz Lab, we have these things called critique sessions, which are like my favorite meetings, and we do them biweekly as well, where we get to show up with like maybe we're working on a project or a data viz that we want to share with our team to get constructive feedback. And those are really fun sessions because we just kind of get to like do it on a Friday and chat about some data viz. And, you know, my coworker might suggest like, oh, I would change the color palette, or like, oh, I would make it maybe like a bubble chart instead of this kind of chart or something like that. And so those are super fun just to like work with my team a little bit more closely. And then obviously a big chunk of it is like actually doing the data science. So we are primarily an R using group, as I mentioned before, but some team members in our group also use Python. I mentioned Google Earth Engine, so like JavaScript. Those are also some languages that we all dabble in. But we definitely have a big focus on reproducibility and reusability. So we're obviously pushing a lot of the things that we do to GitLab or GitHub for version control. And then, you know, with data science comes a lot of, you know, just experimentation and hypothesis testing and things of that nature. So that's also a big part of the data science work as well. And then in coordination with sort of the data science, or in parallel really, is the data visualization part of that as well. And so I mentioned like thinking about things like color palette and like accessibility, 508 compliance. These are all things that we think about as well. Making sure that these visualizations that we create and that we post online and are public facing are accessible to the general public. It's something that's super important to the work that we do. And so, you know, I'll finish off by saying if you're interested in a career in the Department of Interior, or maybe an internship or something of that nature, you know, the Department of Interior hires across from, you know, at the end of your undergraduate degree up until like you get a PhD. So there's all kinds of GS levels is what we call them, the step levels that you can be accepted on. And so all of those, anything related to that would be posted on usajobs.com, including internships, like full-time positions, things like that. So make sure you'll have all your materials together, like your qualifications, your GPA, transcripts, etc. And then I also like I always get asked like what's some word of advice on like trying to get a foot into a career in the federal space. And I always say like just getting connected with folks who are already working in the federal space is important. They can shed light on sort of the process and their work and sort of how their team dynamic works. Because you know, I've often heard like my team dynamic is not the same as like my colleague at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, or maybe the Bureau of Land Management or something of that nature. So all of these teams vary. But yeah, that's my whole spiel. I'll leave it at that. I've been talking for a while, so.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Just wanted to kind of, you're mentioning about the steps and sort of it's a bit of hoops to get into, you know, to apply to federal jobs. And for Chico State students, we're actually having a nonprofit and government specific career fair coming up in April. So that's probably another place that you can kind of go learn what are all the things needed to apply to a government job, because it's definitely different.
Yeah, and I will say like even this is a conversation I've had so often with my colleagues, is just the actual interface of USA Jobs is like very overwhelming and not very accessible to folks who like don't know the whole process. And so if like any of you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me. I know I just have so many qualms with like the application process and like how it's all structured that I actually want to make a change for that. And I'm trying to with our diversity and equity and leadership team that I'm a part of. And so this is a whole spiel, but like suffice it to say that if anyone has questions, I'm happy to help with that as well.
Awesome. What I can do is I can add that to also if you want to put your email that you want people to reach you at in the chat. I can also add that to our website with a little blurb about you being open and available to answer questions about USA Jobs and stuff.
Yep, totally.
To site help the USA Jobs. Cool. Cool. So yeah, at this point, anyone in the chat, you feel welcome to unmute yourself and ask, or you can type your answer, or you can type your question in the chat and we'll relay it. All right. Then I will ask some questions here. Um, so you mentioned a little bit about how some of the classes you took in undergrad were, these environmental classes where you had to go out and collect data, and you're like, okay, now what? And they're like, hi, here, learn R. Um, which, you know, is one way to do it. Which I said, so kind of a two-part. Which courses in school would you say benefited you the most in your current job? And conversely, which kind of courses or topics do you wish you had exposure to as an undergrad or even as a grad, that you would have liked to have?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So in undergrad, I didn't take a single data science class. It wasn't actually until grad school where I took a class called Environmental Data Science, taught by Dr. Allison Horst, who is, I'll put her name in the chat. She's such a stellar data scientist and teacher and has so many awesome resources. Um, so yeah, I actually like am not formally, I always tell people I'm not like formally trained as a data scientist. My undergrad was in biology and then my master's was in environmental science and management. Oh, cool. Yeah, someone already posted Allison's link. Um, so yeah, anywho, I didn't take any courses specific to data science in undergrad. Although if there's one sort of series of classes that I wish I had taken would be related to like using GitHub and version control. I think that's so important. Um, Even if it's just like something as simple as like how to write a commit message or like how to write a merge request or something like that. I think teaching that at the undergrad level is so important because so many jobs nowadays are requiring folks to be, have experience with GitHub and version control and Git, for version control, right? Like we don't want to be losing important code and deleting things on accident, and not being able to recover them when we need. Um, Especially in like the federal space too, it's obviously really important, that we're not like losing important information. Um, so yeah, GitHub, GitLab, all of that, super important to data science and the work that we do. I also think it would be really fun to just to have taken like a data visualization course. And we kind of dabbled in that environmental data science course that I took in grad school, where Allison actually, our professor, would show like a really bad data viz, and we would get into groups and critique, what was wrong with the data viz, or like what we would change, or how would you make this more accessible, or like, things of that nature. And I think even having conversations like that were really fun and cool, and just got sort of like the juices flowing of thinking about data viz, even then. So yeah, definitely like data viz focus, GitHub focus, things of that nature.
Nice. Let's see. So Daniel asks, what has been your most impactful project you've been a part of throughout your time at USGS? And what are your 5 favorite findings from that project?
Well, that's a good question. Oh, actually, I think this is something I put together late last year. Um, I was one thing I had talked to my boss about was sort of creating a one-stop shop for folks to go to learn more about ways that they can kind of like customize their ggplots, which for folks who are unfamiliar, ggplots are sort of the ggplot is the package that you use to create a lot of the maps and like charts in R. And so I wrote this blog post actually that highlights a bunch of different ggplot extension packages, like Geom Highlight and like GGFX and like a bunch of other really fun ones. And it gives you, it provides all the reproducible code, so anyone could just copy and paste it and be able to rerun. And it's just like very clear and concise and tries to get at ways. We called the blog post actually "Jazz Up Your ggplots" as like a fun title, but yeah, like getting at that of like creating really custom and fun ggplots for folks. And I mean, it is like hydrologic focused with the data that we use, but like really you could use any kind of data and create a really fun custom plot. And I'll drop the link to that in the chat because I think it's a great resource even for students who are interested. Yeah, we have ways of like adding custom fonts and like text and things like that. So feel free to check that out if you guys are interested.
I'm also going to put your website in the chat because it's built, it's Quarto, right? It's a Quarto website. Love Quarto. So
Oh, that's another class I wish I would have taken, was like a Quarto or R Markdown focused class would be really cool.
let's see. Have you worked on or know anyone who's worked on the USGS 3D elevation program, hydrogeography related? And also, do you get to do any interesting field work?
So I haven't personally worked on the 3D elevation program. I know folks that have. It's kind of beyond me right now. I don't know a ton about it. But definitely something that I've been hearing more and more about. So I definitely need to read more into it. And then related to the latter question, to field work. So I work remote. I don't know if I mentioned that. And we're one of the few divisions actually where our branch is like entirely remote. So I don't do any field work. I'm not a hydro tech or anything of that nature. I don't go out and check on the stream gauges or anything like that. It's just entirely like data science and data viz focused work. So
I'm going to piggyback on that a little bit. Do you miss going out and doing field work, that you like collecting data and doing experiments in the field like that you did in undergrad?
yeah, there's moments where I definitely do. But I mean, it's kind of something you sign up for when you take on a job like this. And I knew that. I knew going into it that like it would be a lot of technical work. Not to say that I don't get to do like other kinds of work that are less technical. We still do like writing up of like reports and things like that. Even like I help out with the social media content, so I get to help out with like writing alt text and like actual Twitter posts and things like that. So there's ways to like sprinkle in less technical work that I really appreciate. But yeah, there are definitely moments where I see some of my colleagues like out in the field and like Sierra Nevada doing really cool field work, and I'm like, oh man. But no, I think I'm very lucky in the sense that like I'm able to work remote too. So
Nice.
I have
Yeah.
a quick question. I found it really cool how like you switched from like an environmental undergrad into like a data science career. Currently, I'm going more like an IST undergrad, but I'm also kind of looking around for more kind of like fun sciencey like careers and that kind of thing. What would you suggest for me to kind of like make that shift? And would you like think it's possible to do that as well?
yeah, totally. In fact, a lot of the folks in my branch are not trained data scientists. Like a lot of us come from biology backgrounds or ecology backgrounds. I have a colleague who has like a PhD, but was teaching for a while. So like, we all come with different experience. And I think like, even within the jobs that you're in currently, like you can find ways to incorporate data science, which is something that I kind of always tried to do. But yeah, I think like, binding yourself into this sort of box of like, I have to be a certain kind of scientist is so subjective. Like we all have ways that we can dabble in different topic areas and things like that. So yeah, I wouldn't confine yourself to like a box of saying, oh, well, just because I have an undergrad in biology, then I'm only a biologist. I think there's a lot of overlap in a lot of the work that we do in the STEM field.
Oops.
I have a question. Nobody has. What would you advise somebody, like we have all these students who are new to data science, say they have no background or they have little background. Where do you recommend them they start at or with, or what would be your recommendation, Janelle?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. And it's something that like I think about too, of like, having known R and like these different languages for so long now, you kind of like get into this world of like, oh, well, a lot of people know about the language and the lexicon that you're saying, but that's not true. And I try to be more clear even when I'm explaining things like ggplot or R or whatever. So that's a good reminder of that. But there's the thing is like there's so many resources available online. I mean, I even tell students like YouTube has so many free tutorials of like how to make a ggplot or like how to read in a CSV file. How to use tidyverse, which is like sort of like a data wrangling package that can help make things a little bit like cleaner and easier to wrangle your data. And when I say wrangle, I mean like um, doing things like selecting a column or mutating, which is like adding a column or things like that you can easily do in Excel. You can also do in a package called tidyverse, just to like be clear with my language. So yeah, I would say there's tons of resources available online. There's an R for data science book that I believe Hadley Wickham, who is one of the creators of R. It's a free book that has a bunch of like really awesome information. I can try and find a link and paste that too. And I think I have like a section in my website actually that has a bunch of other like free resources for like how to read it, like how to make maps and things like that in R specifically. So I'm happy to like add those links as well in the chat.
Yeah, I've used the R for data science book as a reference number of times. So I just put that in the chat for people as well.
Yeah, and it's available in a couple different languages too, which I think is great. So
I think there's almost like a book club Slack workspace or Slack channel where people can go through that book together. Well,
that's great. Yeah, and I'll also say like I think the R community is great in the sense that like you mentioned Slack, and I'm a part of a couple. I think there's like an R for data science online learning community group that I'm a part of. And they have channels of like code help or like questions or things. And people are always posting questions like, how do I do XYZ to a chart or something? And there's always some expert in there who knows the answer really quickly and can help you. And I think that's something really nice about our environment and ecosystem is that folks are really happy to help. And there's Stack Overflow links and things like that. I also think there's like an art to Googling a question related to R, which like I don't know that I'm the best person to talk about that with, but like yeah, I think even like when you Google questions related to an error or something, like being very specific in how you Google is more helpful. And using things like quotes when you're Google searching can help too. So anywho, just like some off-topic things.
Do you use ChatGPT in your work?
No, so actually we cannot use it. We have this thing called SWAM, which I'm forgetting what the actual abbreviation is for, but it's one of those like it's either like you're able to use it or you're not, and ChatGPT is banned, so we are unable to use it in the federal space.
Oh, so like there's it on a federal computer, there's only certain sites that you can go to, and that's one you can't go to.
Yeah.
Interesting. Don't forget, anyone else can just unmute. So let's see. Why did you decide? You may and you may have answered this. Why did you decide to stop at a master's?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it was like one of those things for me where I felt satisfied enough with sort of the 6 years of higher education that I had. And that was one question I had with my mentor when thinking about graduate school, was like, do I really need a PhD, or would I feel satisfied enough with a master's? And, initially it was the conversation of like, well, you can do a PhD and then master's out of the program if you feel as though like you've done what you needed to do. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I get that, but also I don't want to have that pressure on myself of like signing up for a PhD program in itself. And so I leaned more the master's route just for that reason, to like alleviate a lot of that pressure that came with doing like and starting a PhD. I don't think a PhD is completely ruled out for me though. Like, it's something that's still in the back of my mind and something that I might revisit in a couple years. I just know that I wanted to get into the workforce and like build out my portfolio a little bit more outside of academia. And I was able to find this position and it worked out. The timing ended up working out well. So that was sort of my reason for wanting to like finish at the master's at this point, just because I had been in school for a while, and I didn't take a break between undergrad and grad school. I just went straight into a master's program. So I was pretty overworked by that point, and just needed to kind of like step away from academia for a little bit.
Do you think you definitely needed the extra schooling for the master's?
I would say so. I think like had I not, I think I should rephrase. The master's program really helped me get the position that I have right now. For sure. Like I think I can say that in confidence of knowing, and like even the connections that I made in grad school, like with Allison and with other professors and things that went on to write letters of rec for me and be able to vouch for me and things like that, and who are mentors to me now. Definitely like was one of the advantages of doing grad school. Do you have to do grad school to get a position in the federal government? No. Do you start at a higher GS level, which is like a higher pay and higher step? Yeah, of course. But at the same time, you can work your way up in the federal scale. So yeah.
As you have changed your stream completely, what were the initial problems or struggles you faced while pursuing that career?
Could you say the beginning part of that again? Sorry, I missed the first part.
I mean, you have completely changed your stream, right? Before that, you were in a different section, and now you're pursuing your career in different sections. So what were the troubles or difficulties you found while working?
Yeah, I think it's just like, I think data science is this sort of like ever evolving field of new packages and new tools constantly being put out. And I think like going into the job, I was like, well, I don't know everything about data science, and I'm not like a perfect Python programmer or anything like that. And I've never like made a package or anything. Like I'm not a package developer. And so I kind of felt like I was like falling short a little bit. But after talking to my boss actually about my interview process, they were like, no, actually you showed up in different ways. Like you asked questions related to DEIA, and you had a lot of like knowledge in data viz that you brought to the table. And you were already thinking about accessibility and things like that. So I think like it's easy for us to kind of get in our heads of like, oh, we're never going to know enough and we're always going to like be behind, but actually you know more than you think you know. And I think like reminding myself of that, even like switching between these different career paths that I've taken from like undergrad to grad school to now this position, is something that I've just had to remind myself a little bit more. I don't know if I actually really answered your question, but that's just a little bit of what came to my mind first.
Awesome. Thank you. So another question in the chat. Have you had educational or work experience in spatial data science through any GIS systems like ArcGIS?
Yeah, so less on the side of ArcGIS. In grad school, I was using QGIS, which is basically like an open source version of Arc. And that was mostly related to like homework assignments and things like that required it. And I actually feel like I've grown a lot in my spatial data science, data analysis skills since taking on this position. because a lot of the visualizations I was making before were more like charts and less maps, more graph focused, but maps are obviously a huge part of USGS and the work that we do. And so I've definitely been able to like build that skill set more even within my job. And I think that's important to note is like, there's still a lot of things that I'm learning even within like the year and a half that I've been in my career, and even like expressing to my boss and like higher ups that like these are certain projects that I'm interested in, and like I'm interested in specifically like environmental justice as well. And so I've been able to be a part of an environmental justice focused project currently that I'm working on. And so there's a lot of space even within the federal government to like voice kind of projects that you want to be a part of and things that are important to you. Sorry, I'm going off topic. To your question, GIS is important to the work that we do. As our group specifically, I don't think we even have a contract with ARC GIS, because we do most of our analyses in R, being that it's open source and we can just share all that code, which we normally do to be public facing on GitHub. So yeah, we don't currently do a lot of ArcGIS work, but I'm familiar with it.
Have you taken any statistics classes? And if so, how valuable was it for your career, for your job and as a data scientist?
Yeah, great question. It's funny you say this because I was speaking to someone recently about this. I've actually never taken a stats course ever in like my 6 years of higher education, which I think is like almost like laughable because you're like, how are you a data scientist and you've never taken? Anywho, all that to say is that like a lot of the work that we do, we're not actually doing a lot of stats. That's sort of a lot of like the hydrotechs or maybe the hydrologists themselves are doing that work, and our team specifically is focused more on the data visualization side of things. So I don't actually do a ton of stats in my day-to-day work. And if I do, it's something very like minimal, like a linear model or something like that. But again, there's like a bunch of resources online we can lean on. Yeah, just I don't do a ton of stats in my day-to-day work, nor do I have a bunch of exposure to it.
What would be another course that you wish you would have taken? It would have helped
Yeah,
you.
probably a stats course along
Probably
with that.
a stats course.
Yeah. I think it's important, like it's important, especially when you're using a language like R that is like very stats focused. I mean, I did do like I was running like ANOVAs and getting p-values and things like that for that undergraduate research project that I was telling you about. And that was sort of like almost like learning on the job kind of. But had I taken a course in undergrad, that probably would have definitely helped with like an independent research study.
Yeah. Oh, we got another question. Says you mentioned that you have autonomy and creativity. Are you typically given a broad project topic to work on and find data-driven analysis from there?
Yeah, sometimes it kind of just depends on the scope of the project. For instance, I was working on this bottled water project that used like water use inventory data across the United States, and that felt pretty broad. And so I remember working with my coworker who is now on maternity leave, Haley, during the time, and we synergized a lot of like, well, what can Haley do, and then what can I do, so that we're not like overlapping in our work. And then like, Haley was doing a lot more of the data analysis and I was doing a lot more of the data viz and like thinking about how the site would be made on like a mobile screen versus a desktop. And so things like that. So yeah, we definitely like have space in that sense. And it kind of is dependent also on like the project managers. So a lot of the times with VizLab specifically in my group, we have folks come to us and say, hey, we have this cool new data release or this new, data set or something that's coming out in a couple months, or maybe it's already out and we want to like publicize it and make a website or something for it. Here's sort of what we're thinking. What are your thoughts? What are your ideas? And so then we kind of do like a brainstorm session, and then we think about the data and we look at it and kind of think about ways that we can visualize it, and work with the project managers a little more closely. So it's really just dependent on a lot of variables of like scope, project manager, team, how many people can help out, who's doing like what roles, like in terms of data analysis versus data viz, things like that. So lots of variables in that sense.
Yeah. It's definitely a team science, not just a team science, but everyone has their specialties.
Yeah, totally.
And I know there's always, I'll say angst, but or maybe a little bit of grief among students in undergrad when it's like, okay, we're doing a group project. It's like, well, you will be more often than not, you will be working with people. And so being able to build those, collaboration skills, like, okay, what can you do? What can I do? How to work together, just being able to effectively work, especially on a remote team, right? I mean, so much of our work is remote now. It's kind of awesome.
Yeah, totally. I would echo that. I think like collaborative, like I think a lot of times when we think of data scientists, we think of these like what we call like the lone wolf. And I don't even really like that phrase, but sort of that scientist who's like in their room, like cuddled away, kind of like doing their own thing. But really a lot of the work that we do is like so collaborative, and like I'm constantly pushing code that my coworker is then reviewing. And so we have a whole review process. It's definitely super collaborative. And I would say like as a student, like dig into that, because it's going to be a lot of what the workforce is. You're going to be working with a lot of different personalities and people who code differently than you and things like that. So it all comes with it, but a lot of things you learn on the job too. So
For sure. Excellent. Well, looking at our time, I know, a lot of the students have like another class or whatever to go to. I'm gonna put the kind of want to thank everyone for attending and putting the post survey link in the chat. Again, if you'd be very helpful and informative for us to just kind of give us a little bit of feedback about this event. Huge thank you to it's not Elmira. Elmera. Sorry. It's like I knew I was saying it wrong. I was like, no, this is not right. When we were looking for new speakers and I came across your website, I'm like, oh, I gotta contact her. I just like love all of the things that you're doing. So really appreciate your time spending and talking with, Chico State undergrads, grads, and our San Bernardino grads and students as well. So really appreciate this. Again, we'll put her contact information on our project website, and the recording will be up on our YouTube page in a little bit as well. So, any last questions, comments? We'll be here. We'll have it open for a little bit, but appreciate everyone's time. Oh, where did your website? I like your 30-day graph challenge. I've tried to do the chart challenge. I've tried to do things like Advent of Code. Oh my God, that's hard. Or just those, even Tidy Tuesdays. And I never can manage to make the time to sit down and do it.
Yeah, sometimes it's like, especially at the end of the workday, you're kind of like, okay, I've done enough data science. I don't need to do anymore.
How did you find time to do like the chart challenge? Were you given time during your workday?
Yeah, our team actually, we all kind of like synergized together to do it. So
Nice.
yeah, I hadn't not been, I probably wouldn't have done it.
Takes a lot of time.
It's a lot of time, it's a lot of energy.
But we learn so much from
Yeah,
it.
and it's cool because a lot of people share their code too. So you can just like scroll through the hashtag 30-day chart challenge and see all the fun charts that people make. So
Yes. Awesome. Okay, let me make sure we're good. I'm gonna go ahead and